structural impact threshold. So, like I said, we're outside of my area expertise, so the folks that are more familiar with the analysis and the process that went through will be able to provide better, more thorough answers.
Excellent. So hopefully you'll be able to attend. I do want to make one other comment editorially, just so that everyone knows. We are also open, so anyone who has a question, we are going to any meeting, any community meeting to answer it. This is a follow-up meeting that we're scheduling on Thursday, but if any other community, we've gone to several different communities when you have a meeting, if anyone has one of the things we ask at the back is if you give us your name and address, then that allows us to follow back up with you. Also, you can follow directly up with us. Our email address, I believe, is at the end of this presentation, so you'll have that contact information. Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Ma'am in the purple, you're next, please.
Thank you. My question is sort of the same as his. I live in Sandtown, and my house is over 100 years old. And I find it hard to believe that all this digging will be done and it'll be safe for us to stay in our homes. Will we be asked to sell our properties? Or what? And I just can't imagine living in a house with all this digging going on and we not be affected by it. Will it be safe to stay in our homes, or will we be asked to sell our properties?
Excellent, thank you for that question. So I'm gonna still err on the side of Mark answering that instead of you, Leah. But to talk about the process in the larger scale, all of the properties that have been identified to date in the environmental document for full acquisition, we've contacted every property owner that falls under that category. So if your home, if that property needed to be fully acquired, construction was going to impact, or the actual right-of-way was going to impact, we've already made all of those acquisitions. Is that correct, Leah?
That is correct. Everyone has been contacted, and we are either in process or if the process has been completed for the acquisition.
Right, so if you have not been contacted at all to date, that means that that property is not anticipated to have an impact that requires acquisition. But to answer the second part of your question, which I think is it safe to live there where construction is happening nearby?
Yes, I mean, that's if you're, I mean, and I'll say this, I understand your concern. I'm not trying to minimize it, right? So, yes, I mean, I've lived in a home where construction was going on right next door, and I understand the concern. All of and designs do develop. If for some reason, as part of a design development, it was determined that there would be some impact to anyone's home who hasn't been contacted yet, then we would certainly change our approach there and contact those folks. I mean, we can't. We cannot. Construction, whether it's excavation, whether it's roadway work, whatever it is, and have impact to any properties that we're not working with the owner. I mean, that's sort of, I mean, it's kind of as straightforward as that, right? So, ideally, it's 100% clear early in the design process. In some cases, it's not, because like I said, the design develops, but for every property that we know of today that'll be impacted by our construction operations, we've contacted the owners and are working to try and go through the full acquisition process, which is sort of the next section of it.
Yeah, and I want to just make sure I make the offer again, that if you wanted to ask about your particular property, we've got the folks in the back of the room that can be able to answer about any particular property. So we've brought enough folks from the real estate team to be able to answer what's going to happen specifically at or near my home.
Well, Not really.
Not, well, to be able to have that, the ongoing conversation.
Right, we did start
Correct.
the conversation, but we
Correct.
don't, we wouldn't be able to give you an absolute right now on where we are, where your property address would fall within the alignment.
Correct.
If that makes sense, but we can certainly take your information, have a conversation with you, and, get your contact, give you a call, and look at the address and come back to you with the information once we can go back and do the research. And we would be able to do that within a matter of days.
Thank you, Leah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Barbara. I live on the 600 block of Reservoir Street. So I'm closer to the top of the tunnel than at other parts of the alignment. And I think the question everyone is asking is a real estate question, Leah. It's for you. It's my understanding from speaking with council that when subsurface rights are acquired in a property, the effect that it may have on the rest of the property is something that falls under severance damages. And so how do we, and this is also actually it's a very fun engineering problem because all of our houses are connected. And my house is 140 years old, and the mortar was originally sand and lime, and the lime has long since leached out. And we feel a lot of vibration. It's hard to know what's going to happen, given that you can't predict the future. So how is it when we're having this question about our subsurface rights? For me, that goes part and parcel with what are the potential consequences to our homes, and what kind of engineering work is Amtrak able to do to shore up our homes? I think one of the leads on this project, I think it's Deborah, the associate counsel, said that she wanted to leave our neighborhoods better than she found them. We like them as they are, but if you want to strengthen them from the inside out, I think we'd all be open to that. So is there a part of the real estate process that's going to keep using engineering?
The real estate process is more of an acquisition process, and so that would be different in a side. If we are establishing the OSIP, which is the insurance program. If there is,
I'm sorry to cut you off. We're very aware of the insurance policy, but no one, and I know that there's no cap on damages, but there's a significant emotional cap. We don't want to have a crack in our homes, and we don't want to have to make claims for 30 years. I think a lot of us do take the train. As Heather said, we take the train to New York, we take the train to DC, we all work up and down the East Coast, or a lot of us do. And we know how fast they go and we know how it feels. And so, is the real estate process open to negotiating further engineering studies as part of that acquisition? Because they do legally go hand in hand.
I know you're asking it as a real estate question, but I think we have to answer it as an engineering question.
Great, yeah,
So
it is an engineering question,
Yeah,
for sure.
right.
It's a fun puzzle. I mean,
Trying to figure out the best way to answer it. I guess I would say the real estate process is probably not open to additional engineering analysis, right? It's kind of maybe the best way I can answer that part of the question. The acquisition, specifically for subsurface rights in this case, does not envision any, whether or not there's any structural impact on the homes, right?
are you open to it? I mean, you guys keep announcing how much money's going into this project.
If the analysis shows that there's.
So you want to do more analysis?
Well, but there's analysis that's been done, the engineering is still advancing, the means and methods will be finalized with the contractor. And there will be pre-construction survey for all homes that are within the impact area of the tunnel. If there's, for any reason, through those analysis, through the pre-construction survey, is there's concern that there's gonna be damage, and yes, we are not just open to it, we're actually required to provide additional shoring up of the property, whatever the results
You
are
are.
showing. But if the analysis we have to date, or that we're gonna continue to advance in the pre-construction surveys, don't raise any additional concerns,
Yeah.
then the real estate process doesn't allow for us to offer structural improvements or architectural improvements, on a quarter-wide basis. That's,
Or can you guarantee those structural improvements pending, an assessment by a structural engineer that we all have access to?
I don't know if we can answer that
Yeah,
question
maybe
at the
just
moment.
food for thought.
But
Thank
here's-
you so much.
Yep.
I'll let the next person go.
I appreciate that, but to kind of close the loop on it, what we are doing is trying to capture the questions that you are asking. If we can get to a better answer to a particular question, we will do so. And as we get to that better answer, what we are doing is trying to put that information up on our website, but we'd also share it back with anybody who's kind of in our mailing list that allows us to communicate back with you. So if we can get to a better answer, I'm not sure how we get to one when we're talking about a what if. It's a very difficult thing to come to a definitive, this is the response, right? So it is a difficult thing for us to answer when it's coming in that what if term. But if I can get to a better answer, I will try to circle back with a better answer. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think that Barbara brings up a really great point in terms of the homes being adjoining. And I would love to understand the logic behind negotiating on an individual case-by-case basis versus engaging the community as a whole. Because what happens to one home will impact others.
So, I think, this is a real estate question, so.
Yeah, I mean, we're
Go ahead.
welcome, and if there's a community group that wants to talk and negotiate as a whole, we're welcome to that. It is not Amtrak's position to send out mass offers on a community. We deal with the property owner of the parcel that we're working with, and that is their decision if they want to open themselves up to a more broader negotiation.
Yeah, I think that for the Thursday meeting with Reservoir Hill, that we would be interested in expanding that conversation.
Great,
Yeah.
wonderful.
That sounds, but I'm gonna put a pin in that for 1 second. So open to it, but I wanna kind of continue to make sure everyone understands that a parcel and a property right is kind of an individual decision. And so even if that is something that happens, we would have to have all of those individuals agree to the same decision. I believe that's correct, right, Leah?
Well, I mean, we could, not everyone on the same block would have to agree to the same arrangement.
Correct, but you would have to have conversation with each parcel.
Absolutely.
Correct, that's what I wanna make sure everybody
Absolutely, because we have to
understands.
maintain folks' privacy.
Correct.
It's a private decision, it's a
Yep.
personal and individual decision.
Excellent, thank you.
Also, so I understand that Amtrak is seeking eminent domain over Union Station, and that the arguments of Union Station are that the market value was undervalued. So for Union Station, the price offer was for $250 million for Union Station in Washington, D.C., which I would agree. But the argument also made was that they made significant investments to attract retailers, and that they've tried to work with Amtrak to meet the expectations for their needs. Could you just, understanding that you want to follow the legal process, explain to everyone in the room what their eminent domain rights are?
So I'm gonna pause because we're actually gonna talk about that on that private parcel conversation in a moment. So she's gonna talk through what our process is on private parcels as opposed to public. But we can't comment on pending litigation, so we can't talk about what's happening at for another property owner. The same privacy that I just mentioned still applies here. And just, I wanna respect all the people who are standing up behind you. So if you can give us one more question and then we move to the next, and then we could circle back, that would be great.
Yeah, great. As it relates to section 106, I understand that that's being amended. So as it relates to the property on Utah and North Avenue, the ventilation facility, I understand by law, prior to the approval of the expenditure of any federal funds on the undertaking or prior to the insurance of any license, Amtrak would not be able to demo the property. Is that correct?
So the person who can talk about section 106 is not here this evening, right? Here? Yes. Yeah, correct. So she's available on our meeting on Thursday. We made sure that we had the people who could talk about section 106 present for Thursday evening. So I can't answer that question. I don't know that anyone here, is able to answer a section 106 question.
Okay. If I could just ask one more quick question. Knowing that Amtrak gave the community about a week's notice for this meeting, could you just clarify how much notice the community members in which you're interested in acquiring their subsurface rights or any property are receiving?
Absolutely, Leah.
We're hoping to start making offers on subsurface next month. It's fairly complicated. We do not come to these decisions lightly for filings or anything. We strive to give anyone that we're working with at least 6 months to come to an agreement with us.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm on Park Avenue in Reservoir. And one question I want to know is why, when you showed your real estate platform, the surface levels and your airspace, why didn't you give dimensions of how far down that those surface levels are? So at the surface level, at the, what is it? Subsurface level, why didn't you give the feet of how far they are down? And then in Route 4, it included Park Avenue. And at the corner of North Avenue and Reservoir is one of those big yellow signs. I don't think none of the homeowners in that section got a notice. Or did they?
A notice for the meeting?
No, not a notice for a meeting, for eminent domain.
No, we have not filed eminent domain.
But you said you had 500 properties?
No, so, great. I appreciate your question. I think I understand where your confusion is.
Okay.
So what Leah has explained is what the process is and how many properties that need to have subsurface rights, that acquisition process to occur. We have not started it. This is us.
She said
We've got it. We've completed the surface acquisition properties, which are not the same as these subsurface rights. So the ones that have received all of those letters are all of the surface properties that are impacted by the entire tunnel. What we're talking about right now today are those subsurface across the entire tunnel alignment, and that hasn't actually started yet. So right now we're just trying to educate you on surface rights, subsurface rights, air rights, and what that process will be.
So when you come Thursday, can you have your dimensions? So if the subsurface right is only 20 feet down, can you have that so we can really see the process?
We have
because
that.
You guys are the one doing this presentation, really, I think leaves us in the dark.
Right, so we have actual depth of tunnel information available for that conversation to help share that. And we can go through Leah's piece to make sure we have it for
Yeah,
the groups.
absolutely. And whenever the offers are made, you will receive, the offer letter will accompany an individual map that will have all the information for your specific property. It will have the depth of the surface level, it will have the surface level elevation, the property line elevation, and then the elevation of the tunnel. You will know exactly where that is for the tunnel for your property.
Each property.
Now, and I'm just like Barbara, if you tag in my property, what makes hers, his, or anyone else's in that same block is not gonna be affected. And then that's it, that's all I have to say.
Yeah. I'm not sure I understood that last question.
No, she's saying that if something happens to her property, that something happens to her property, and something happens to her property. So now you have almost a half of a block that is being affected to. But yet you're saying that you are only gonna maybe notify only one person in the block, and then.
No, so, thank you for clarifying, because I wasn't understanding your
Yeah.
question. What we're saying is, we have to notify each property owner
Individual property
along
owner.
that alignment. So every individual property, so that 500 number that Leah had, all 500 individual property owners have to be contacted. That is the requirement.
What Ms.
for
Olivia
the-
means is that the alignment goes under a section of houses that are connected, but those houses connect well
other
up the
houses.
block to other houses. You know, you have the highlighted lines that you have on your map, but there are other houses that are connected. They're called party walls, connected via shared party walls for another, I don't know, It depends on how big the block is. So are you gonna, what are those property owners supposed to do?
Yeah, Barbara, to your point on Utah North Avenue, where they want to put the ventilation facility, that end unit was not ever designed to be an end unit. And so that is holding the entire weight of that block. And I know that Amtrak is negotiating, so that is a conversation.
Yeah, I'm trying to hear the question and I'm gonna repeat it.
Yeah.
So, I think where I'm a little bit confused, and maybe you guys can educate me, is that what you're saying is, this is my home, this is my parcel. There is a shared wall, right? And that shared wall is being used structurally to connect each of the homes. Which I think is what, I was not understanding that, so that kind of gave me clarity. So they are shared walls. So if the question is, if we are negotiating with the properties that are right above the tunnel, but the shared wall is going out beyond the extent of the tunnel width, that the person at the end, I'm just trying to make sure it makes sense to me, that the person at the farthest end would not have been involved in that conversation about subsurface rights, but their home could be affected because this home was affected. Am I capturing that?
Yes.
So, okay, I see. Unfortunately, now it's a slightly different discussion, right? So for property rights, property acquisition, the real estate acquisition will not extend beyond the limits of the tunnel.
Right.
For pre-construction survey and talking with folks in the community, we can extend the limits of who is involved in that discussion and pre-construction survey. And I think I understand and hear your concern. We've identified the influence zone of the tunnel, which is actually wider than the actual tunnel itself, right? So property acquisitions, we're only looking for any property directly above the tunnel. Influence zone of the tunnel is actually a little bit wider, but I understand the concerns, and when we look at that, if there's properties that are connected structurally to those properties within the influence zone, I don't think we have any issues with contacting those members as well and going through the pre-construction survey process with everybody that's structurally connected. So
Did everybody hear that whole question? Because I know Mark moves the microphone. Did everybody hear the whole answer? Yes, does that make sense? Okay, because if you're I think that piece of the structurally connected was the piece I was not understanding. So that everyone would be able to be part of that pre-construction survey process, because that actually extends beyond the width of the tunnel. Okay, yes, sir.
Yes, how you doing? My name is Keaton Otley. I'm a resident in Reservoir Hill, also a landlord. And my question is on the acquisition side of the subsurfaces. And I wanted to know, how does Amtrak evaluate that when making offers to people? And also, I feel like it definitely should be, in that case, I'm also a licensed realtor. In that case, some sort of representation, because most people don't know about subsurface or mineral rights or anything like that.
Thank you.
The valuation's been difficult, to say the least. Actually, because there's not really a market for subsurface.
Exactly. If we was in Texas, we would have oil.
Right. If we were in Texas, it would be a different story. But we're not. So I am working very creatively to try to maximize the benefit towards the property owner for their transaction. I don't think my lawyers will let me get any more creative with my language than that. But we are, there is, and that's one of the things I keep coming back to, it's because it doesn't really have a value. I'm like, we still have to pay. So we think that we've got an idea on how we're gonna be able to make it happen, and I think everybody should be happy. But it has been very difficult, particularly, all the science is telling us that, the impact is 0 to nothing. And so that's the other piece, that we were doing it in a different way, that you would actually take that under damages, right? But aren't damages according to the science. And so the appraisers have not been able to actually assign a percentage of the lot value and have that be consistent. And so that's where we've been challenged. But if you wanna send me an email to the email address, we can have a conversation about it. And let me, also, if you're a landlord, give me a couple of your addresses and we'll see where you fit in there. And I would actually love to talk to you about, how the market in that area too. So I'm not an appraiser. I went to appraisal school just because, terminology, and I wanted the knowledge, but I've never actually practiced appraisal. I just like to argue with them, so.
Yeah, I got some more, but I'll save it.
Okay.
Thank you, appreciate your question.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're talking about real estate and acquisitions, and I'd like to talk about the property that Amtrak purchased, at the corner of,
North Avenue, Utah.
Utah Place and West North Avenue.
Yes, ma'am.
It's gonna be used for an emergency ventilation facility that will spew toxins in the environment in the event there's an emergency under the tunnel. When are we gonna talk about that?
Well, okay, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, right? So,
I took the question as, when are we gonna talk about the intermediate vet facility and what is coming out of that facility?
And we can talk about that now. I'm interested because
So-
I asked at every meeting, I've gone to every meeting you've had, and they don't wanna talk about it.
So we have very specifically requested that the designers and the folks that are able to answer that question be available on Thursday, because we've heard that question.
Oh
very
my
specifically.
gosh, that's crazy.
I spend a lot of time coming
Yep,
to these meetings, and you guys never have anyone to explain to any of the people that's gonna be affected by these harmful pollutants in a facility that you all, in your infinite wisdom, have placed steps away from an elementary school, in a city that has a high incidence of asthma, pediatric asthma. When are we gonna talk about that?
so on Thursday, the people who can answer that question specifically are going to be present. That was the intent for that meeting, was to discuss the locations of the tunnel beneath Reservoir Hill, and very specifically to talk about the ventilation facility. I think that we've consistently answered this question about where the ventilation facility is placed in prior meetings, and part of that answer has been that was determined based on pure engineering. There were several locations that had ventilation facilities identified as we looked at alternatives. We talked about that in the environmental impact statement, the final environmental impact statement in that document. We've had additional conversation about what will come out of that facility in very general terms, but let me clarify two pieces for everyone's edification, because everyone hasn't been present for all of the meetings. Item number one, when we did the environmental impact statement in 2017, at that time, the MTA was planning to run diesel trains through the new tunnel. One of the things we were very excited about was the decision by the MTA to remove diesel trains from their system by the time that this tunnel is in place. So it will be all electric. That's what their commitment has been to Amtrak.
No diesel at all?
Not true, that's only the first two tunnels, they're gonna build two more tunnels.
Well, they've said that, it's been like, when
Still in
we
the
spoke the
plan.
last time, it was no diesel passenger train.
Correct.
But now,
I'm
and
still
on your
saying-
site, you say that there are diesel trains that will be running during
during some specific hours,
So,
okay?
so-
So that's
I'm
not
good.
true what
I'm-
you just said.
Nope, I'm still giving the same answer, so my answer hasn't changed.
It's a lot.
Passenger trains are electric trains, that is the MARC train and Amtrak passenger trains will remain all electric.
Passenger
But
trains.
diesel will
So
be
maintenance
running too,
trains will
right?
be diesel.
Finish the answer, give me
Diesel
one
will,
moment.
it's a yes or no
So this,
question.
nope, I'm gonna finish answering. So the part that is a little bit more, confusing, I think, to others, is that the trains or the, equipment vehicles that are used to service along Amtrak system could be diesel operated, but they are not trains. They are smaller equipment, so more like the pickup truck, equivalent, not a diesel train that is 20 feet long. And Mark, can you clarify if I'm saying that incorrectly?
That's so different from your website, and that's so different from what you said
There will
before.
be no normal operation of diesel trains through the tunnel.
But there will be diesel trains,
Well, okay, listen.
just yes or no.
No, it's, well, then it's no,
Yes or
then it's no,
Answer is no.
then it's no.
And what
Okay,
about
hold on,
nothing that
hold on, we're
precludes
talking-
freight
we're
from
talking-
running in the tunnel? There's nothing that precludes freight from running through the tunnel.
I'm gonna try to, because we're gonna try to stay as respectful as we can, so that we can make sure that everybody is hearing the accurate answer. And then we're gonna answer the freight question separately, because I think those are two separate issues, and we've been trying to make sure we're keeping that separated. So go ahead, Mark.
So, you're correct in terms of the original ROD approved 4 tunnels, and we have to continue to allow that in the future. We don't know when the 4 tunnels will ever be. No, as of right now, what we're talking about today and what we're gonna be constructing over the next 10 years is.
No power, please charge.
What
I'm
is-
betting it's my microphone.
What is identified as phase 1 within the DFR process. And phase 1 is for 2 tunnels, and those 2 tunnels will be carrying electrified passenger trains.
No diesel trains?
There.
Just yes or
No,
no?
it's a no, it's a no. What I don't.
Ever?
No, answer with microphone.
There,
Put that in
the
writing. You want
diesel,
to
the
see it.
diesel trains, the freight trains will continue to run through the existing tunnel. If there's ever a time where there's something wrong and the existing tunnel is down or something happens, and are there certain situations, maintenance, that has to happen? Potentially, yes, but there's no
Oh my
normal
gosh,
operation.
that's terrible.
Diesel trains will be running.
No.
Oh my gosh.
Why can't you say that?
Well, I did say that, I did say no, right? I did say no. If there's a potential, I mean, if there's a potential, but that's not the plan, and there's no normal operating circumstances.
There has to be a plan, because you can't just run it in if you don't have a plan. So you already have a plan, you already have a pump in Norfolk Southern. We already know this.
And Norfolk Southern wrote a letter of support of the project in 2015.
There is no plan to run diesel trains through the tunnel.
Then put that in writing.
We have actually put that in writing several times, and it is, so for everyone who is listening there, we have put it in writing, it is on our website. When we've gotten asked that question, we've answered it, exactly the same. It is electrified passenger trains, and that is gonna continue to be our response, because that is what we are, designing the tunnel for, is for electrified passenger trains. Yes, sir.
Good evening, I just wanted to ask a question. I spoke to a gentleman a couple months ago. I don't know if anybody else has spoke with him. I have his name written down, I don't have it right offhand, but anyway, he asked, was I open to, not the property itself that I live in, but the property under, for digging, as far as purpose, and I asked him, I said, so if something goes wrong in that process of the structure, then who's responsible?
And so I think what you're asking, I'm not sure who you spoke with, so I can't really speak to that piece. I think what you're asking is, in the construction of the tunnel, if there's an issue during the construction of the tunnel to your property, who's responsible? Is that the question you're asking? Okay, So the answer to that question is, if during construction there is an issue, and I'm gonna kind of parse this a little bit, the contractor is responsible if there's a problem during construction. Ultimately, Amtrak is responsible if there is an issue other than that. Am I saying that correctly?
Ultimately, Amtrak
Is responsible.
During construction, we'll have a contractor, and they'll manage the process, but ultimately, Amtrak is responsible. So if there's any damage to your home from construction, Amtrak's responsible.
So even with that, we won't know, until it happens then.
Right, in that case, right, but what we have been doing is, what Mark has talked about a little bit, is that we have been doing studies on what we're anticipating to happen. Basically, that's what those engineering studies are for, and it's kind of building off of what you could anticipate based off of those conditions. I think that what I mentioned a little earlier is the what ifs, when you can't plan for it, is very difficult to be able to answer a question when you don't know. These designs are based off of quite a bit of historical information. So it is not as if we are saying these engineering plans and these perceptions are done just for here and we've never done it anywhere before. We're using people who have a lot of experience in the design and construction of tunnels throughout the country and some international as well. So we're basing all of these on railroad standards, we're basing them on structural standards that are applicable for this kind of project anywhere.
I'd be curious.
All right.
A lot of things I'm gonna have.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you get your additional slides. I'm gonna let this one question happen, and then these two women, and then we'll let you get through it. It's 7:26, so I'm gonna be monitoring where we are on the time, because we do have to get the room back together and close. Yes, ma'am.
I will say, I'm disappointed that members of the Reservoir Hill community could make it to 2 meetings, but your whole team could not.
Yes, ma'am.
I wonder if you could explain the process for if damages occur to someone's home after the acquisition, how long will you be liable? And I ask this because we've all witnessed a sinkhole on North Avenue that occurred to aging infrastructure and an old metro tunnel line that occurred about 10 years after its construction. And so, how long will you be liable for the damages that you cause to our homes and to our city infrastructure?
I'm not sure.
It's okay if you can't answer, I have more questions.
I don't know in terms of the insurance from construction, but did we kind of go through this question? What was the what was it? Okay, so from the construction insurance, the statute of limitations is 10 years. But from operations, which will be continuing, that'll probably be continuing through as long as Amtrak is operating.
And is it true, to my understanding, there is a legislative cap to Amtrak's liability during the running of trains? So there is a financial cap that the federal government has raised for Amtrak. So if there's a disaster, there is a pie that we all would have to share along the alignment, including passengers that are injured, any train injuries or death. Is that true?
It is a statutory tort.
It is a tort liability cap that applies to all railroads. It's set by the federal government, and it's per incident.
Okay, thank you. And I also wonder, you said that it's a case-by-case situation. In case of an emergency, you would have some things that you'd plan for, and some things that you could not possibly plan for because you're not sure what would happen until it happens. And I wonder, at what point will those of us who live under the alignment and would be directly impacted by an emergency, when will we see an emergency management plan that will actually be communicated between the federal government, the local government, and the state government. We saw what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, when there was not an enacted plan. In seconds, things turned horrible. Water was contaminated. Families had to leave their homes. They had to enter the hospital because the firemen didn't know how to put out fires, because the railroad station didn't communicate what kind of chemicals were being released into the community.
That's great. I'm gonna answer one part of that before you answer that.
And I'm not done. We've all experienced water
Yes.
contamination in the last 2 years, where our local government didn't tell us. They didn't tell us when it started, they didn't tell us when it ended, and they didn't tell us how we could clean it up and have clean water again. So we are used to that. We know how that works. So my question is not just how Amtrak or FEMA will react, because we've seen how FEMA reacts. It takes a really long time. But how are you going to strengthen our local government so that we're actually notified in case of an emergency, so that we can actually respond to those emergencies, and so that our emergency protocol, including DPW, our fire department, our police department, our local medical facilities can actually react in case of an emergency? And when will you release that to us? We'll need it.
Okay, I'm gonna answer the first part first. So the first part that I wanna make sure I say again for the record is freight will not be operating, so that there is a difference here between freight operations and passenger rail operations. I just kind of want to continue to reiterate that Amtrak operates passenger trains.
So freight will never operate on the Frederick Douglass.
They
tunnel.
just said that. They just said that it could
They're
happen.
gonna stay operating in the existing tunnel in case unless something happens in the
But it's
existing
possible.
tunnel. But our host railroad agreement with NS limits what they
Norfolk Southern.
can, Northern Southern, sorry, limits what they can freight on our line, and they are not permitted to do hazardous materials, chemicals. I think it's rubber pellets or
Plastic pellets?
plastic pellets,
Plastic
something to
pellets,
that
yeah.
effect.
So like what was released in Philadelphia during the last train accident?
I'm not familiar, but just but to answer your questions about emergency management, emergency response, all of that, we will have a subject matter expert with us at the meeting on Thursday. We know that this is a concern. I will tell you that with the existing tunnel, we run drills with the City of Baltimore Fire Department, the police, the first responders. We educate them on access to the tunnel, how our trains are structured, etc. So we do a lot of education and coordination with our first responders, and there is a plan for the existing tunnel. We will not have a plan for the new tunnel until the tunnel is built, because it's a little bit premature, but it will be very comparable to what we have in existence today for the existing tunnel. But we do those drills, we do educate, we partner. We are not emergency responders. We know that we are dependent on the local resources to respond with us.
And that's my worry, honestly. But what I'm trying to say is even during construction, there could be a possible emergency. And I'm also obviously concerned for my neighbors here that already live on a tunnel and would need that management plan. Do they have access to it now? Do they understand how to respond in case of emergency today?
Well, I don't know what they know or don't know, but it is a published plan. It is available on Amtrak.com, and we do our training, and we do prepare. We are prepared for emergency situations. We would respond to this emergency situation just like we do with a derailment or an active shooter or any situation with respect to an Amtrak train or an Amtrak asset. So we will be prepared when the time comes. We also are just starting as a company because all of this new construction with these bridges and tunnels is kind of new for us. We're kind of shifting and becoming a construction company. So we are in the process of preparing a construction emergency management plan that will be activated during actual physical construction of all of our major projects.
Oh, great.
And so that is something new for us that will include the education, that will coordinate with our contractors, etc. And so that is something that is currently in development today.
So
And
you won't
contractors
begin-
generally, most contractors, most construction jobs like this,
They'll have
those
their
same
own.
plans, all contractors have those plans, that is a requirement. All owners make that requirement. So Amtrak being new to it, it's not something that contractors are new to, they're required to do it.
So
I'm
they'll
just trying
have
to
that
respect this
On
time.
the OSHA and everything.
Yeah,
So
I'm gonna try to respect the time
And I'll make sure
ask
Kathy
that Ms.
has,
Apple have, if she has, or to see her, because I still have to get.
We still have more
some
slides to do about real estate.
Yes. We just
Yeah,
wanna
And
get
I want
everybody to get that
I
question.
want to get the real estate stuff.
Sure, I just
Okay.
have one final question, about alerting homeowners before you begin construction, because it sounds like your emergency plan will begin before construction. Is that correct? You said you'll have a plan, because you're new to this and you're just learning how to do construction emergency management, and so before you begin construction, you'll learn how to do, is that
Right.
correct?
So I want to clarify what I said. So all contractors have that as, when they're doing any construction of any type.
But we're not
they
in
have it.
business with your contractor, we're in business with you. so
Understood,
that's why I'm asking the
I was trying to
question.
share that as
Okay.
a general
Yes.
information. So all contractors have those, every project that they do construction on. What we communicate back to the public, that's the public piece that Deborah is referring to, that will be available. But what we also say is that the emergency provider, so all of your first responders, that's the first line of defense. We're always going to tell you to go to your 911, right? We're always going to say to do that as your first line of defense. Our team is going to make sure that we're prepared, but we're also going to make sure we're communicating as we can with the community, because those things happen during construction and we have to be prepared. And that's a part of what our team has to know across the whole program.
Wonderful. And what I was trying to say is, I have a neighbor here, who has several times gone outside their house and drilling has already begun in soil samples in her yard. So I'm wondering and hoping that Amtrak moving forward will inform us before you begin work and actually acquire permits between sampling our soil or even minor disturbances that happen in our community, because it definitely sets a precedent for lack of communication.
That is not us.
No.
Oh, it's you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is not our
The
work.
real estate team handles that, so,
Okay.
It's your subcontractor, because
And that's the
I've had those
problem.
conversations and I've had to shut them.
It's actually been Amtrak officials getting the,
So I'm gonna need, so here's what I'm gonna ask, oh, I'm
Will you
sorry,
send me an
so
email?
we're going back on it, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna step so that we don't do that, I'm sorry, Ms. Apple. So, if you can send an email to me as well as Leah, we will coordinate that, because all of those right of entry agreements, it's within the city. We've done it every time. We communicate with that property owner, so this is
Well, it
very much
wasn't
out
in
of.
my backyard, but it was literally like almost on my front step. And
So
I
is it,
basically-
so is it Amtrak or is it,
It's your subcontractor.
it's Amtrak.
is it on your property, is it public right of way? That's why I'm asking, I'm
It's
trying to get clarity.
public right of way, but
Uh-huh.
it's literally right,
Right
I
in
step
front
off
of
my
your home.
step, and at one point, they were literally under my window, and when I addressed them about it, I was told, well, if we break it, then we'll just pay for it.
So, so please communicate directly with me. That sounds very outside of what we've agreed to, but in public right of way, we're gonna get the permission from the public entity. But if it's in your property, on your property proper, then that's that right of entry agreement that we would have had. But I wanna get clarity on your situation.
but you know what, I think we can actually do one better at the same time.
Get clarity.
I will work with our contractor that's doing
Find
this
out.
work, whenever they're issuing and getting a permit for work in a public road right of way, they'll be coming to me from now on and letting me know where they're gonna be, and we'll make sure that we give you proper notice for anyone that's within like maybe 500 feet
Yeah.
or something along the right of way. Is that good?
We'll work that out.
Yeah,
We'll
because
tell you
that's something I
exactly.
can, that's something I can fix. That's something, communication is 100% in our control, so we
Yes.
can do that.
Ms. Ethel, and then we're gonna try to
Yeah.
get through this project.
One question, true or false? Is it true that there are third and fourth tunnels for double stack freight in phase 2 called out in the 2023 NEPA reevaluation plan for the BNP tunnel?
That is news to me, so I don't.
So
NEPA reevaluation, no, I mean, so I think the answer to your question is false, but,
I've read it and they're in there. They're in there, we obtained it through a FOIA request.
Right,
It
so-
calls out third and fourth tunnels for double stack freight in phase 2 in the NEPA reevaluation. You should read it, if you haven't read it yet, you should read it.
So I just said from the beginning that the original ROD has 4 tons.
So does the 2023 NEPA reevaluation.
Right,
It also
so
includes
The
it.
NEPA reevaluation is about phasing, so it doesn't change what's in the original ROD, it phases the approach, right? So
They're still included in the plan to have double stack freight trains under our homes at some point. I may be dead, but the young people in the room may not be.
So to try to clarify Mark's answer, when you are doing a reevaluation, you still cannot take out items that were in the original environmental document. So I think that's to kind of answer that very specifically. We can't remove what's in the environmental document. What we are doing is reevaluations as we're refining design, and our design at this moment for what we're funded for, what we are constructing is for 2 tunnels going through on the alignment that you have seen in that green line is 2 tunnels. We can't remove it because that is part of that environmental process. So those that are already shown are still going to show as existing, but in the current place where we are, it is 2 tunnels being constructed for electric passenger vehicles.
The most volatile.
Leah, I'm
trains
gonna
are
give
gonna
you-
remain on a
So,
150-year-old
we'll
tunnel.
just, we're gonna do this really quick, because I wanna make sure that if you have questions about this, that we have time to do it. Also, you can send us an email, and we'll answer your questions that way, if possible, as well as we can. Amtrak's acquisitions of real estate is governed by, and we have to follow the Uniform Act, which is from 1970. It tells us what we can and we can't do. We're trying to do as much as we can for the people that we're impacting. Everyone that we've worked with on the surface side and done relocations, everyone's very happy with their situation. It's not ideal, no one's asked for this. We understand that, and our team's working very sensitively with everyone as much as possible. Under the URA, we are required to provide notice, we're required to provide compensation. And so you will be receiving, if your property is in the tunnel alignment, you will be receiving a notification of your property being impacted, and that we will be doing evaluation, and then you will be subsequently receiving an offer. And then from that offer, we go from there towards acquisition. We are required to negotiate in good faith. It is not something where we can just come out and give you 10 days to give us a response and then file condemnation. I personally wouldn't do it that way if the law provided me to. It's just not the right thing to do. We will be acquiring over about 604 private properties, 72 surface acquisitions, we're a little bit more than halfway done there, and then 532 subsurface acquisitions. It's just a lot to go through, and so we're not in a position to actually make 532 offers all at once. So basically what we're starting is we're starting at if you remember where we were from the groups of the road closures, we're starting at group 1 and then working our way up from there. So if you're between Pressman and Baker, you should be receiving an offer in the next couple of months, okay? We've been working with private property owners since 2022 to try to get all of this done. As we said earlier, there may be additional acquisitions identified, but right now where we are, all approved acquisitions for surface that has a relocation and it's the total take, everyone has been contacted and we are working with them directly. Subsurface offers will be beginning in January of 2024, and it is our goal to have everyone who has property in the alignment of the tunnel where we would need a subsurface real estate right for you to receive an offer in 2024, okay? Each property owner will be contacted directly from Amtrak. If you want to align yourself with your community organizations form a new community organization. That is a personal decision that you can make, but Amtrak is not going to make an offer for your property to a community organization, okay? Program real estate questions may be directed to fdt.realestate@amtrak.com. I have 4 people that monitor this email address. I monitor it myself. I strive to have my folks make sure that we are responding within 24 hours. We are coming into the holiday season, and I don't have a life, so I'll probably still be monitoring the email address too. This is still important to understand. There is a process involved. It is notification, valuation, negotiation, and then acquisitions. It is our goal, and what we want to do, truly, is to acquire property by contract. I do not enjoy filing eminent domain. It is not something that I want to do, ever. But I also have to advance this program. And so we will work with you in good faith. We'll work with you reasonably to come to an agreement to acquire by contract. We have filed, I think, 7. So we're at less than 10% of the total private acquisitions. And I can't go into it, sorry. It's a very complicated situation. We do not use eminent domain unnecessarily. One thing that we do need is a live person to work with. There are some defunct LLCs that own property. And if we can't find anyone to work with, then we're left with no other option. If you read the filings, which they're public domain, it's fairly descriptive in telling you why we are where we are with the filings. But again, I can bring this back that still has the email address on there so that you can see it.
So for anyone, and I'm sorry because I have to respect the folks that work in the building that do need to clear out the building. The email address is F as in Frank, D as in dog, T as in Thomas, .realestate@amtrak.com. So anyone who does have a one-on-one conversation that they want to have, has any additional questions that they need to email, we're gonna ask that you do that. Can you go 2 more slides for me, Leah?
Right.
Keep going back, keep going ahead.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Keep going ahead. Keep going, one more. Right. And so also for anyone who is trying to reach our team, outside of the real estate process, you can email us at fdtunnel@amtrak.com. You can call us at 443-423-1115. That does go directly to myself and my team. We'll answer any questions. Additionally, you can follow us on social media. We do try to post information about meetings on social media. We both on Instagram and Facebook. We are trying to get into Nextdoor. It does require a little bit more navigation to get an account in Nextdoor, but we'll be posting information in Nextdoor as another way for sharing information. The QR code that you see here at the bottom, if you scan that, that will allow you to join our mailing list. That's that email list that we're sharing information through that as well. So I'm gonna suggest that if you're interested and want to stay active in what's happening on the project, that is another way for you to get information and get to us. All right? Yes.
So I want to take a moment to talk about Train 188, which was a crash site in Philadelphia that killed 8 people and more than 200 people were injured. The train was going 106 miles per hour, which was over the posted speed limit. And a person's account who actually dedicated their entire life to fighting disasters, and they were the CEO of the September 11th Fund. They had said it took 6 hours to hear back from Amtrak while they were in the hospital. And when Amtrak came, they handed them a customer service card. And it took them multiple attempts to reach Amtrak. It took about 6 days to get a response, to which Amtrak never said, what property do you need to retrieve? Can we cover your medical expenses? It was to that person's account where they thought Amtrak's policy was don't put anything in writing. And they talked about the lack of compassion, but they did say that those from the fire department and for everyone who was on the train, they gathered together and they helped one another, but they did not see that same compassion or plan or response from Amtrak. And so as you talk about a emergency response plan, I would love to know what your thoughts are on that.
I can't comment on that at all, because I can't, I don't think we should. I can't comment on that at all.
That's your lawyer?
200
That's
people
your
were
lawyer?
injured and 8 people died.
That's your lawyer.
I'm not.
If you can't respond to the commuters on your train, how can you respond to the community?
I can't speak for what happened in Philadelphia is what I'm saying. I can't speak to that.
So can you speak to the community response? In
I
a
can't
case of an emergency?
I can, and that is what I can respond to. I can respond to what our team is committed to doing. We've already articulated exactly what our intent is. I have worked on other programs that are similar to this, and in every situation in that program, my commitment is to work with communities. That is my job. That is what I can commit to. I can also commit to what this Amtrak team is doing, which is what we've articulated. Deborah articulated that there is an emergency plan, and we are facing an emergency. We still have to go to a first responder first, because we want to make sure that people are addressed as immediately as possible by the right authority. I can't speak to anyone else's compassion. I can speak to my own. And so I can't articulate anything on what may have happened in Philadelphia. I've been in Baltimore for a long time, and I care about this community, I care about this city, and the only person I can speak for is myself.
But you're speaking for Amtrak. You're speaking for Amtrak.
My moral values say that I will do everything that I can in the event that we needed to have that situation addressed. And I can't say anything more than that. So I also have to get this room closed down in 6 minutes. So I appreciate everyone's time tonight. Thank you, and hope that we see some of you on Thursday.
That's like a preview to